The Catacombs of Rome, ancient catacombs, underground burial places under Rome, Italy, of which there are at least 40, some discovered only in recent decades. Though most famous for Christian burials, either in separate catacombs or mixed together, people of all the Roman religions are buried in them. Beginning in the 2nd century AD, mainly as a response to overcrowding and shortage of land, the Christian catacombs are extremely important for the art history of early Christian art, as they contain the great majority of examples from before about 400 AD, in fresco and sculpture, as well as gold glass medallions. The Jewish catacombs are similarly important for the study of Jewish culture at this period. A number of dubious relics of catacomb saints were promoted after the rediscovery of the catacombs. History. Precursors. The Etruscans, like many other European people, used to bury their dead in underground chambers. The original Roman custom was cremation, after which the burnt remains were kept in a pot, ash chest or urn, often in a columbarium. From about the 2nd century AD, inhumation became more fashionable, in graves or sarcophagi, often elaborately carved, for those who could afford them. Christians also preferred burial to cremation because of their belief in bodily resurrection at the Second Coming. Christian catacombs. The first large-scale catacombs were excavated from the 2nd century onwards. They were carved through tuff, a soft volcanic rock, outside the walls of the city, because Roman law forbade burial places within city limits. Previously, the pagan custom had been to incinerate corpses, while early Christians and Jews buried the dead. Since most Christians and Jews at that time belonged to the lower classes or were slaves, they usually lacked the resources to buy land for burial purposes. Instead, networks of tunnels were dug in the deep layers of tuff which occurred naturally on the outskirts of Rome. At first, these tunnels were probably not used for regular worship, but simply for burial and, extending pre-existing Roman customs, for memorial services and celebrations of the anniversaries of Christian martyrs. There are 16 known subterranean burial chambers in Rome. They were built outside the walls along main Roman roads, like the Via Appia, the Via Ostiense, the Via Labicana, the Via Tiburtina, and the Via Nomentana. Names of the catacombs, like St. Callistus and St. Sebastian, which is alongside Via Appia, refer to martyrs that may have been buried there. About 80% of the excavations used for Christian burials date to after the time of the persecutions. Excavators, no doubt slaves, built vast systems of galleries and passages on top of each other. They lie 7 to 19 meters below the surface in area of more than 2.4 square kilometers. Narrow steps that descend as many as 4 stories join the levels. Passages are about 2.5 by 1 meter. Burial niches were carved into walls. They are 40 to 60 centimeters high and 120 to 150 centimeters long. Bodies were placed in chambers in stone sarcophagi in their clothes and bound in linen. Then the chamber was sealed with a slab bearing the name of age and the day of death. The fresco decorations are the main evidence we have for early Christian art, and initially show typically Roman styles used for decorating homes with secular iconography adapted to a religious function. The Catacomb of St. Agnes is a small church. Some families were able to construct cubicula which would house various loculi, and the architectural elements of the space would be a support for decoration. Another excellent place for artistic programs were the arcosoleums. Decline and rediscovery. In 380, Christianity became a state religion. At first, many still desired to be buried in chambers alongside the martyrs. However, the practice of catacomb burial declined slowly, and the dead were increasingly buried in church cemeteries. In the 6th century, catacombs were used only for martyrs' memorial services, though some paintings were added as late as the 7th century. For example, as Saint Stephen in the Catacomb of Commodia. Apparently Ostrogoths, Vandals and Lombards that sacked Rome also violated the catacombs, presumably looking for valuables. By the 10th century, catacombs were practically abandoned, and holy relics were transferred to above-ground basilicas. In the intervening centuries they remained forgotten until they were accidentally rediscovered in 1578. After which Antonio Bosio spent decades exploring and researching them for his volume, Roma Sotterranea. Archaeologist Giovanni Battista de Rossi published the first extensive professional studies about catacombs. In 1956 and 1959, Italian authorities found more catacombs near Rome. The catacombs have become an important monument of the early Christian Church. Today, currently, maintenance of the catacombs is in the hands of the papacy, which has invested in the Salesians of Don Bosco the supervision of the catacombs of St. Callistus on the outskirts of Rome. Responsibility for the Christian catacombs lies with the Pontifical Commission of Sacred Archaeology, which directs excavations and restorations. Study of the catacombs is directed by the Pontifical Academy of Archaeology. Typology. Roman catacombs are made up of underground passages, out of whose walls graves were dug. These loculi, generally laid out vertically, could contain one or more bodies. Cubicula and cryptae are also commonly found in catacomb passages. When space began to run out, other graves were also dug in the floor of the corridors. These graves are called forma. List of catacombs in Rome. The Roman catacombs, of which there are 40 in the suburbs, were built along the consular roads out of Rome, such as the Appian Way, the Via Ostiense, the Via Labicana, the Via Tiburtina, and the Via Nomentana. Catacombs of Marcellinus and Peter. These catacombs are situated on the ancient Via Labicana, today Via Casalina in Rome, Italy, near the church of Santi Marcellino e Pietro ad Duas Loris. Their name refers to the Christian martyrs Marcellinus and Peter who, according to tradition, were buried here, near the body of Saint Tiburtius. Catacombs of Domitila. Close to the Catacombs of San Callisto are the large and impressive Catacombs of Domitila, spread over 15 kilometers of underground caves. The Domitila catacombs are unique in that they are the oldest of Rome's underground burial networks, and the only ones to still contain bones. They are also the best preserved and one of the most extensive of all the catacombs. Included in their passages are a 2nd century fresco of the Last Supper and other valuable artifacts. There are around 4 million bodies buried in the Domitila. They are the only catacombs that have a subterranean basilica. Entrance to the catacombs is achieved through this sunken 4th century church at Via del Sette, Pisa 280. In the past, the basilica had become unsafe, and was abandoned in the 9th century. It was rediscovered in 1593, and much of it was reconstructed in 1872. In the beginning of 2010, at the request of the Vatican, the Divine Word Missionaries, a Roman Catholic society of priests and brothers, assumed responsibility as administrator of St. Domitila catacombs. Catacombs of Commodia. These catacombs, on the Via Ostiensis, contain one of the earliest images of a bearded Christ. They originally held the relics of Saints Felix and Adauctus. Catacombs of Generosa. Located on the Campana Road, these catacombs are said to have been the resting place, perhaps temporarily, of Simplicius, Faustinus and Beatrix, Christian martyrs who died in Rome during the Diocletian persecution. Catacombs of pretext status. These are found along the Via Appia, and were built at the end of 2nd century. They consist of a vast underground burial area, at first in pagan then in Christian use, housing various tombs of Christian martyrs. In the oldest parts of the complex may be found the cubiculum of the Coronation, with a rare depiction for that period of Christ being crowned with thorns, and a 4th century painting of Susanna and the old men in the allegorical guise of a lamb and wolves. Catacombs of Priscilla. The Catacomb of Priscilla, situated at the Via Salaria, in front of the Villa Ada, derives its name probably from the name of the landowner on whose land they were built. They are looked after by the Benedictine nuns of Priscilla. Catacombs of San Callisto, sited along the Appian Way. These catacombs were built after AD 150. With some private Christian hypogear and a funeral area directly dependent on the Catholic Church. It takes its name from the deacon Saint Callistus, proposed by Pope Zephyrinus in the administration of the same cemetery. On his accession as Pope, he enlarged the complex, that quite soon became the official one for the Roman Church. The arcades, where more than 50 martyrs and 16 pontiffs were buried, form part of a complex graveyard that occupies 15 hectares and is almost 20 kilometers long. Catacombs of San Lorenzo, built into the hill beside San Lorenzo Fuori le Mura. These catacombs are said to have been the final resting place of Saint Lawrence. The church was built by Pope Sixtus III and later remodeled into the present nave. Sixtus also redecorated the shrine in the catacomb and was buried there. Catacombs of San Pancrazio, established underneath the San Pancrazio Basilica, which was built by Pope Symmachus on the place where the body of the young martyr Saint Pancras, or Pancratius, had been buried. In the 17th century, it was given to the Discalced Carmelites, who completely remodeled it. The catacombs house fragments of sculpture and pagan and early Christian inscriptions. Catacombs of San Sebastiano, one of the smallest Christian cemeteries. This has always been one of the most accessible catacombs and is thus one of the least preserved. On the left-hand end of the right-hand wall of the nave of the primitive basilica, rebuilt in 1933 on ancient remains, arches to end the middle of the nave of the actual church, built in the 13th century, are visible, along with the outside of the apse of the chapel of the relics. Whole and fragmentary collective sarcophagi were found in excavations. Via a staircase down, one finds the arcades where buried cubicula. One then arrives at the restored crypt of S. Sebastiano, with a table altar on the site of the ancient one and a bust of Saint Sebastian attributed to Bernini. From here one reaches a platform, under which is a sandstone cavity, aged catacombs, which once may have been named ad catacombs, thus giving this and all other tombs of this type their name. 3 mausolei of the second half of the 2nd century open off the platform. The first one on the right, decorated on the outside with paintings of funereal banquets and the miracle of the calling out of Saracens demons. On the inside contains paintings and inhumation burials and has a surviving inscription reading, Marcus Claudius Hermes, the name of its owner. The second, called by some, Tomb of the Innocent Eors, has a refined stucco ceiling, Latin inscriptions in Greek characters, and a graffito with the initials of the Greek words for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. On the left is the Mausoleum of Asia, with an exterior wall painting of vine shoots rising from cantharoi up trompe-l'oeil pillars. A room called the Trillia rises from the platform, roughly in the middle of the basilica and cut into from above by the present basilica. This covered room was used for funereal banquets. The plastered walls have hundreds of graffitos by the devotees at these banquets, carved in the second half of the 3rd to the beginnings of the 4th century, with appeals to the apostles Peter and Paul. From the Trigilia, one passed into an ancient ambulatory, which turns around into an apse. Here is a collection of epitaphs and a model of all the mausolea, of the Trillia, and of the Constantinian Basilica. From here one descends into the Platonica, a construction at the rear of the basilica that was long believed to have been a temporary resting place for Peter and Paul, but was in fact a tomb for the martyr Quirinus, bishop of Sestia in Pannonia, whose remains were brought here in the 5th century. To the right of the Platonica is the chapel of Honorius III, adapted as the vestibule of the mausoleum, with interesting 13th century paintings of Peter and Paul, the crucifixion, saints, the massacre of the innocents, Madonna and Child, and other subjects. On the left is an apsidal mausoleum with an altar built against the apse. On the left wall a surviving graffito reading, Domus Petri, either hints at Peter having been buried here or testifies to the belief at the time the graffito was written that Peter was buried here. Catacombs of San Valentino. These catacombs were dedicated to Saint Valentine. In the 13th century, the martyr's relics were transferred to Basilica of Saint Praxedes. Catacombs of Agnes, built for the conservation and veneration of the remains of Saint Agnes of Rome. Agnes' bones are now conserved in the Church of Agnes Fuori le Mura in Rome, built over the catacomb. Her skull is preserved in Si Chapel in the Church of Agnes in Agon in Rome's Piazza Navona. Catacombs of Anaphora. On the Via Salaria, the Catacombs of Anaphora are datable to the end of the 3rd or the beginning of the 4th century, and contain diverse frescoes of biblical subjects. Jewish catacombs. There are 6 known Jewish catacombs in Rome, 2 of which are open to the public: Vigna Randonini and Villa Torlonia. The Jewish catacombs were discovered in 1918, and archaeological excavations continued for 12 years. The structure has 2 entrances, one on Via Syracuse and the other inside Villa Torlonia. The catacombs extend for more than 13,000 square meters, and date back to the period between the 2nd and 3rd centuries, and possibly remained in use until the 5th century. There are almost a century of epitaphs, but these do not show any examples of a particular relief, beyond some rare frescoes showing the classic Jewish religious symbols. The other catacombs are not open to the public because of the instability of their structure and the presence of radon. Gallery of paintings from the Catacombs of Rome.